Hey everyone, it's good to see you guys. I'm excited to be here. We have a very special guest on today. Her name is Hayley Quinn. She's an internationally recognized dating expert, TED speaker, and startup founder. She's a progressive dating coach that assists men not only in increasing their wealth and relationship, but also in self-confidence and self-esteem. Hayley, thanks so much for taking the time to be here. I'm really excited to have you and dive deep into some questions.
Awesome. No, I'm looking forward to it as well. Hello, everybody.
So I wanted this more to feel like a conversation. There'll definitely be some questions, but I like to keep it more of a conversational tone. What do you think when it comes to creating relationship with another person, whether you're a man or a woman, what do you think is one of the most important things that you can be doing?
So one of the most important things I think you can be doing it's actually a trend that I see with the men and the women that I work with is a lot of the time when we're analyzing relationships, whether it's like, how am I messaging this person? Or does this person like me enough to want to be in a committed relationship with me? A lot of the time we actually take a ton of personal responsibility for that. So if the other person doesn't respond to a message or they're not open to having the kind of level of commitment that we want, we take that as a personal reflection of ourselves. Whilst I would really encourage people to instead be thinking that everything is going to be a filter to our lives. And in fact, what's really important isn't how amazing and great we are. It's actually a lot more to do with the work that the other person has done on themselves before we met them, what headspace they're in, what approach to life they have. That's going to really affect how they engage and treat with us much more than like the little minutiae of that message that we sent. So I'd say to people to worry less about trying to get it perfect all the time or trying to learn lots of techniques. Obviously seek to have that self-improvement, but also you've always got to balance that desire for self-improvement with also knowing that you also have to have an awareness that we can't control everything. And a lot of it is actually a reflection of how the kind of space that the other person is at.
Right. So it's what I'm hearing there is it's not misinterpreting the signals. So recognizing that maybe you've done the work wherever they're coming from, what they're responding to, what they're not responding to. It might actually not have anything to do with you. It's a relationship. And by the very nature of a relationship, it's two people coming together with all of their good and bad, their shit, their ugly, and all of that, seeing how that plays out.
Yeah, and you can only build a bridge from two sides, right? So a lot of the time we overemphasize what we've done, our contribution, and we actually underemphasize what the other person could and should be contributing.
Okay, I like that. So what happens? Like, let's say two people are starting a connection in a relationship, and one individual doesn't start showing up in the way that you prefer, like them to show up, which I see all the time. People get upset. They have these unconscious expectations of how the relationship should go, and that affects the very relationship in and of itself. What would you say is a really good way to navigate that space, to navigate the beginning space where you're coming together? Maybe you necessarily haven't talked about expectations yet, but we still have, I think, unless you've done a lot of work, there's still a lot of individuals who might have unconscious expectations coming into the relationship. How do you manage that and go about that in a healthy way?
I think one of the best tools that you can work on as a person when you're trying to manage expectations, and by expectations, like you said, it's like that idea that, it's maybe not be something that you've consciously tried to do, but you start thinking about a person, you start interpreting their actions, you read into their words, and suddenly you have an idea in your mind about where this thing is going before you've done the groundwork and the due diligence of getting to know one another to figure it out. And where I think a lot of people can go or be misled is that their criteria maybe for who am I going to form this relationship, it might be really informed in not a great way. So it could be like, wow, they had an amazing profile, they are the right height, they've got a great job, and actually that first date I felt that elusive spark. And sometimes if we have the killer combination of someone seems to represent what we think we want on paper, and we have a degree of physical, we have that instinctual connection when we meet, sometimes we could do 2 + 2 = 10, And then we think that we're on this one track towards a particular end destination or a particular relationship before we've actually done the real work of getting to know the person and experiencing their relationship qualities. So stuff like consistency, communication, their self-esteem, how grounded they are, all of those things are never immediately apparent. You need time to experience them. So sometimes we predict that we want to have a relationship with someone, but we miss out on even looking or getting to the point where we're able to assess whether they're turning up from day one as having these core relationship qualities. And I think the reason we do that is I think that at the beginning of dating and relationships, it makes us all feel very vulnerable. And you know what it creates? We are in the unknown. We're in the uncertain because we don't know this person. We actually have no idea what they're really about. We don't know where this is going to go or what's going to happen. And the unknown can feel really, really uncomfortable. And so I think sometimes we fight and we push to get to a space where things are known. So it's like, what is this? Or where are we? Or is this person the right person for me? And sometimes that can drive our actions, not in a positive, in actually a way that's quite destructive for the relationship as a whole. And instead, I think if you sense that you're in that space and you're like, I just want to know what's going on, or they haven't replied to my message for 48 hours and I'm freaking out. Instead of like trying to get to a known, sometimes it's actually better just to go, you know what, I am in the unknown. I like this person a bit, so I guess I'm feeling a bit vulnerable around that. And I'm actually just going to have to learn to tolerate this feeling and accept that time is going to reveal, and to actually not try to force a decision too quickly, because it's better with relationships to make, actually being, especially in a committed long-term relationship with someone, is kind of a big deal. So don't rush that decision-making process and learn to be comfortable in the unknown.
I love that. And there's like 3 or 4 different ways that I could see us taking this, but I want to go towards what you're saying about this feeling that comes up within people, this anxiety or this, I'd see it as an attachment style, whether it's an anxious attachment style or, there's anxious attachment styles, there's avoidant attachment styles. Yeah, like all this stuff. So
anxious avoidant.
right. Anxious avoidant. Gosh, oh man. So how, if someone's, if you have that feeling coming up within you, either anxiety or avoidance, how does a person work with that? Like, if that's coming up for you as an individual in relationship, how do you work with that feeling in particularly?
So something that I love, you'll come to know, I love giving really practical tools to people to use and exercises, because I think that for me anyway, as actually quite an anxious individual myself, I always found that very empowering to feel like, well, at least there's something I can do about this. So the first thing is, like they say, knowing is the first step, right? So just know that sometimes, we don't need to have all the answers straight away. We don't need to know where something is going. It's actually okay. It's being in the unknown is okay. That is acceptable. And if you feel that feeling come up, first of all, try and identify that feeling. Like, it might be, as I said, that you start, here's some classic behaviors that I would see people doing if they're really struggling with that feeling. They might be screenshotting that last interaction they had with that person, and then they send it to some friends for some secondary analysis and opinion. It might be like you think like, oh my gosh, I shouldn't message them again, but I'm starting to worry that they don't like me or they're not here anymore, and I kind of want to check in that they're still there. So notice, if you do want to reach out to a person, where are your actions being motivated from? Are they being motivated from that, like, oh, I just can't tolerate it, space of wanting to... Yeah. Then I think once you've recognized that it's a feeling and that will pass, I think then you can start to put in some steps to help you with that. So there's a few things that I really love. The first of all is obviously learning to sit with it, which is tough. Now, a lot of the time when you feel really anxious, you're going to want to do the opposite of that. You're going to want to check. So that could be checking when they were last online, checking their Instagram stories, checking out asking your friends what they think is going on. And suddenly you'll realize that, oh my God, everything I'm saying, my whole dialogue, all my headspace today is filled with discussing what's going on with this person who really reality check here. I may have had a few dates with them. You know, why is it suddenly dominating my whole experience? So we want to try, even if it feels a bit unnatural at the beginning, just to give that other person and that situation slightly less bandwidth in your mind. So I would actually say that if you're a person that chronically loves to analyze everything with your friends, whilst that can be a kind of a bonding experience, I would just instead just be try and adopt a different mindset around that and just be like, you know what, I like this person. I'm just going to see where it goes. I'm not going to think too much about it. So try and take a different mindset. Don't seek secondary levels of opinion and advice on every minor detail. Secondly, get better with not needing distraction. So you might want to put your phone on airplane mode and not check social media. Absolutely don't check when they were last online. You know, actually go lo-fi, turn off all digital devices and do something mindful, whether that's like cooking a nice meal, meditating, having a bath, going for a walk. Do something to like help shift you out of that feeling and to resist the temptation, because when we're checking, we're looking for answers that we can't find. Like we're basically trying to find evidence that's going to support our belief that this person likes me or they don't like me. And really then we're not ever addressing the core issue, which is, why am I doubting someone's feelings for me so quickly? Why is that making me feel so unnerved? And we will never get to the core of that if we're always looking at the other person. So I think it's a really good signal to do some introspection there.
I love that, because a lot of people who come to me in coaching work, they still have those internal patterns of either avoidance or anxious. They're not in a space where they feel empowered. And ultimately, I think that's what it's coming down to, is how empowered you feel within yourself in your connections with other human beings. Where do you think, you mentioned bandwidth, and when all of our bandwidth is being taken up worrying about what they're doing, or not even worrying about what they're doing, if we're coming from a more avoidant attachment style, what's the foundation for that bandwidth? Does that make sense? Like why is it that some individuals have a lot of worry and concern, whereas some don't really necessarily have any worry or concern, or others who are just like, oh, I'm fine, I'm secure in myself? What determines that bandwidth?
So a good way to think about it is, I think, or a nice metaphor, is I think that as individuals, everybody has a different level of intimacy that they feel comfortable with and that they're able to give in return. So you can think and our goal as people really is obviously to develop a healthy capacity for intimacy and address our own demons on that front, but also to be cognizant and aware of looking out for people who can match us in terms of what kind of relationship we have, and just accept that not everybody is going to be able to give out on the same level that you do. So so sometimes, for instance, if we're thinking about someone, if you feel like sometimes and also to know that sometimes people just don't react to intimacy in the same way. Some people crave more of it. Other people, it's like when their level gets too high, it feels really uncomfortable. And so they instinctually pull away. And that isn't our problem to solve. That's, kind of on them as an individual. Our thing that we have to work on isn't trying to solve the conundrum of, patterns of behavior that have been developed throughout somebody's whole lives by ourselves. It's actually usually to know when to walk away if we can really appreciate that someone isn't able to give the same level as we are. So if we're looking at that classic anxious avoidant pairing, which is where like you get an anxious person who basically wants more reassurance with someone who actually likes more space and more distance, how that could play out is the relationship feels like it's going really super well, but actually after a point of having increased intimacy, so maybe a birthday or a holiday together or something that felt really romantic and really awesome, suddenly this person, instead of being like, this is going great, suddenly they're avoiding your calls, or they're less able or willing to meet, or they're expressing uncertainty that you're the right person for them, which could feel really, really hurtful. And it's about being able to step back from that and thinking, is this really, like I said at the start, is this really all about me? Or is this actually about the dynamic of what's going on between the two of us and our inherent compatibility in terms of how much affection we both want to give? And I also want to give like reassurance. First of all, I'm not a psychotherapist, I'm just a dating coach. But I would say I 100% identified with being an extremely anxious person in relationships in the past. Everything that I've talked about, I'm talking about it because I've done it. Like 100%. If you guys have seen my TED talk, you'll get that vibe. And it's one of those things that you just got to know that when you can become more aware of it and you understand, and you start also to kind of build relationships more slowly and perhaps change up your criteria of what you're looking for in another person. And instead of thinking, this person is amazing, how do I convince them to sort of almost change their DNA and give me more of that? Instead, how can I look out for someone who is from the get-go able to meet my needs, able to help me feel really secure, and how I can develop a really amazing relationship with? And it is so possible to move past that. So even if you are constantly checking their WhatsApp at the moment, even if you have analyzed every message that they've sent, even if you're in a boom bust cycle of like breaking up and getting back together, you can actually resolve this and move on to something different.
Hayley, how do you see people overcoming that proclivity to see another human being through the lens of what we want? Because I think that's a big part of this conversation. Like if we're an anxious attachment style, avoidant attachment style, whatever, we're seeing that other person. If we're still in those polarities, we're still seeing that other human being as what they are to us, as opposed to a completely separate human being with their own stuff, with their own. How do you see individuals in your practice and in your work, or even just in your own life? How are you able to see, what's the best way to see someone for who they really are, which obviously I think is the key to real intimacy. It's like, oh, I see, I see them outside of myself, outside of my desires and my own needs. Could you speak more to that?
Yeah, I mean, I love that you've brought this up, because I think that it's so true that particularly when there's this difference between this full sense of intimacy and this real sense of intimacy. Full sense of intimacy is where we do the 2 + 2 = 10 equation of this person looks, or they look like they're my type on paper. Right. And I would like to argue as well, remind everybody that your type is just a hypothetical, right? We don't know who that is, but in your mind, you think you have a type. Plus, those first few dates, whoa, they were really good dates. So, and then suddenly this must equal, amazing relationship. And that's when we're riding that sort of like high of, it's kind of more of an anxious thing of putting a lot on that person to start. We aren't actually really feeling swept off our feet by like the real them. We're feeling swept off our feet by our idealization of them. They're on a pedestal. Right. And inevitably, no one can ever live up to that pedestal, because we are all human beings. We all have our flaws and other things going on. A really great way I heard this process described, though it sounds a bit brutal, I'm going to pull this back, so just bear with me, go through three phrases. Idealization, which is like, this person can do no wrong, everything is amazing, this is great. Then that's followed by disillusionment. That's where your idealization crunches with reality, and evidence and time spent together is coming in, and you're like, suddenly, hang on a minute, this person I had in my mind and this person in reality, they're not the same person, and how do I reconcile that? Then after that, so the third phase is power struggle. So then you have like the working out of the dynamic between the two of you, and then after that, they say what's left is the real relationship. So you have to go through these phases, and obviously you try to manage a good way of kind of approaching this is not to, if you can not go so, although we all do it a little bit, if we could not go so heavy at the idealization phase, it makes the rest of the process easier for us, because we give ourselves a longer time frame to build up a picture of a person and to build trust. And trust is a compound thing. We need to build it over a period of time. So that's why that's why, as much as I would say I would identify as 100% a very liberal person, that's why I'm 100% in favor actually of slow dating and slowing the process down, not to manipulate and trick and coerce and be like, well, that's how I get someone to have a relationship with me. I'll just like, hold off into, I'll just give them intimacy and piecemeal. It's more about you actually coming to a more true decision around who is right or who's a good fit for you in your life and who to proceed with. And I think something that could be really challenging is, I think, particularly if you're single and you want to meet someone, often the single people I work with, they feel unbearable like time pressure around making a decision. They think, oh my God, another year, or I really thought this was going to be the time, and now I'm single again and people are asking me about it. So you feel this like monkey on your back to try and get to this thing of a relationship, which, a lot of people think, first of all, it's not an amazing emotional thing to experience, but it also, I think in our society, a lot of the time we're judged by our relationship status or ability to build a relationship. So there's a lot of pressure to get to that end destination. And so it's very counterintuitive, but it's so much better, I think, to actually slow that whole process down, whether that's on a practical level, maybe see somebody once a week at the beginning. If you meet someone, they're like, oh, I want to see you again tomorrow, and the next day, then instead of thinking, well, this is the most romantic thing ever, you should be thinking, big red flag, this person hasn't got a healthy respect for my time. So I suggest for people to get on board with this idea of like, okay, how can I make myself slower to judge? How can I give this more time? How can I actually, dare I say it, like give things a go, as opposed to coming to a foregone conclusion about what they're supposed to be?
Yeah, I love that. So it's really just slowing down and taking time and seeing the person for who they really are instead of what it is that they want them to be.
Yes, and not getting distracted, because I think there's a few things that can be quite, I see a lot that I think can sort of distract us from what's really happening. So, for instance, another way that kind of intimacy issue stuff might show up for people is that, this is more of a female dating question, but I'm sure that lots of men and people of different orientations will have this experience as well, is you meet someone and at the beginning, they seem to come on really strong. Like they want to see you all the time, they're messaging all the time. They say they haven't told anyone this thing in ages. They're talking to you about going on holiday next year. And you're thinking, again, great, I've found it. This is amazing. And instead of kind of immediately jumping to the conclusion that that is authentically not only what the person wants, but what they're actually able to offer you, instead you take a slightly different slant on that. And you think, maybe this person really wants my approval, or maybe they really want to feel more secure that I like them. And so because of that, they're really pushing the boat out here at the start of this relationship. And actually, are they putting me on a pedestal? Am I being a bit idealized here? Because there's no way that someone could like me that much after like 3 dates. So because of that, whilst it's very validating to want someone to behave towards you in that way, because that's the narrative that, so much media and movies has told us, that someone's just going to come in and they're going to be like, you, and then it's going to be like a big feet sweep. In fact, that isn't actually right. That's not actually real life, though. So instead of like trying to recreate that vision, I think it's so good to just be like, you know what, actually, potentially how we were dating, or some of our expectations we had about relationships in the past, before we had this whole concept of the one and this very romanticized idea of relationships, what could be important then and what should be important. And as I mentioned earlier, it's like consistency, integrity, communication, and these qualities inherently, you cannot see how a person is with them right from the get-go. They only are revealed over a period of time. So you have to remember, like, okay, it's actually all right to be in that unknown. It's all right not to come to a clear decision. In fact, it's probably very powerful to just go, I'm just going to actually see what happens. That's not a bad place to be. It's a good place.
I love that. Yeah, it sounds like it's looking at people not as what their words are saying, and not even just necessarily their immediate actions, but looking at those long-term patterns, which only comes comes to us over time.
Right. And letting go of the need to have a resolution about that, and also letting go of the need to get to the status of a relationship on a particular time frame. Like it's actually better, take your time, get to know people slowly. Remember, commitment is a big deal, and arrive at your conclusions gradually.
Beautiful. I think it's really important to see, just from my experience and what I've seen, I think it's really important to see what it is that other person is offering right from the start. Like real, not just what you think you want them to be, not what they're showing, but actually looking for what's the real truth here. Like what's the actual reality? How is this going to play out long term? And I think when we're willing to slow down, it refines our perception, and we're able to get a better understanding of where it might go, if it might be something that's right or wrong right from the start. I mean, I know for me, when I look back at a lot of my relationships, some of them I just jumped in real quickly, others I completely avoided, and eventually it got to a point where I was like, I just need to be slow with it. And it's really that simple. It's just be slow with it. Be in integrity with who I am and show up fully as who I am, and whether they can accept that or not, I mean, that's on them.
100%. And then also, I think if you, with that mindset, if you had maybe an unexpected, breakup, or someone ghosted you, or things just didn't pan out the way that you were expecting, it's so helpful to go back to that and think, instead of thinking, oh my gosh, I've done this fundamental mistake, I'm a bad person, or this person's gonna they're gonna just find someone who's more awesome or more attractive or more this or more that than me. Instead, if you go, actually, I accept myself, my actions are congruent with who I am, I stand by them, I'll seek to improve in this way, but I trust that not everybody would react or see me in that way, and in fact that this is all a filter towards finding someone who I'm going to really connect with.
Yeah, I like that. So can we rewind the conversation just a little bit and go back to, you mentioned something earlier about the PUA community. I can't remember. And I have a little bit of background there, and I know that you were doing writing with them years back. And I know they kind of teach like techniques to get the girl or get the guy and be a certain way. And what do you think that's ultimately about? Like, if people are interested in that, what do you see? I guess, how do you see a relationship going if people are using those things?
Right. So just to give a bit of background history, I have been in the dating industry for over 10 years now. So I'm like a little dating dinosaur. And I started out by discovering the world of pickup. So for those, would know, probably lots of people watching will know that famous book, The Game. There's pickup artists, traditionally men who teach other men how to pick up women. But, arguably the advice that lots of women get is pretty much in the same ballpark. So we shouldn't make it all about men being manipulative or evil or anything like that. Stumbled across this industry, ended up making a lot of contacts, friends in that world, and actually I got my break in the dating world by ghostwriting. So I was writing their blogs basically on behalf of them as if I was them. So do not slam the pickup artist industry as a whole. There are some really good things that happen in it. A lot of, I would say, second gen or new wave pickup stuff is much more holistic. It's much more about self-improvement, self-esteem, confidence, becoming the best version of yourself. So concepts we can really get on board with. However, there are probably sort of like, there's a different school of thought, because remember, pickup artists don't always think the same. There's a lot of argument and debate in that community. So let's not put them all in one bucket. And there's a different school of thought, which is much more routines led. So that's more about like, say this thing, learn this script, send that message. And that, I would say, is probably a bit more old school as advice, though it still exists. So what I would say is, particularly for the guys out there who may be, seeing adverts on the internet and being like, wow, I could just learn these 5 scripts and this woman is going to hook up with me. Fantastic. To how they can start to look at that critically. Because I think if we can deploy critical thinking, we can take the bits of it which will work for us And we can also realize that there might be bits in there which are not going to work from us and dismiss those as not the truth. Because I think sometimes when we want that magic bullet, we want to have that 5 secret things you can say. That's usually coming from a place of feeling like, you know what, I'm actually feeling like I really am in need here. You know, I don't know. There's nobody that I'm really struggling to connect with people. Intimacy is a fundamental human need. And, you know, I am just want to try anything to get access to that. So the problem can be if why I would advise against parroting a particular script or a very rigid set of rules around stuff is human interactions aren't rigid. They don't follow rules. There's too many variables. There's too many boxes that you could potentially open. So sometimes when we try and overly simplify things, it's like we want to make it like a video game. If we press the right buttons in the sequence, the reward comes at the end. And in fact, that just isn't how human beings work, flat out. So we can have good principles, or we can have concepts. Like I would say, having this idea that people have different levels of intimacy that they can give. To me, that's a useful concept that could help you to navigate things. Having a specific script to change someone's mind if they don't want the same things as you, that's like a step too far. And it's also going to be ineffective. And it's going to be ineffective as well, because ultimately we all want the reward of being loved and cherished and validated and kissed or whatever for who we are as individuals. And if we feel like we've hidden behind something else in order to be accepted, whether that's money or fame or a line, a great pickup line, it's not going to actually give us the validation that we want as people. We're going to feel bad about that. Now, one caveat that I'm going to say, though, because I'm a believer in this, is that there are things, however, that if you're struggling with particularly dating right now, that you can learn. It's not all down to fate. Like, there's definitely things you can do to improve yourself as a person, which will also positively impact your dating life, whether that is a better awareness, better mindsets, and those kind of concepts that I'm really keen on. It could be that if you're someone who is not a natural conversationalist and you're more logical, or that's just not how your brain works, you can learn conversation skills. You can learn how to become a better writer of messages. You can become better at connecting with people. But I think the way that you want to go about that is you don't want to learn something that's rigid. You want to learn principles, and then you want to adapt them so they're authentic to who you are as a person. And that's going to actually give you the long-term reward.
I love that. So it's taking something maybe at the mental level and then embodying that to make it your own, and not trying to fit yourself into something that isn't you.
Right, exactly. Because I see a lot of particularly guys out there, they'll watch YouTube channels of, you know, and obviously not to blow the illusion here, but all these pickup people, they are all businesses. And in order to market yourself effectively as a business, you need to take a stance on something. So if everyone was too the same and too vanilla, then there would be no gravitational pull for them to maybe get more followers on YouTube. So because of that, their coaching might actually be quite different. And I don't know, and I'm not there to comment on that. But a lot of the time, their internet marketing or what the content they put on YouTube might be more extreme because they're illustrating a point or marketing themselves as a business. So be very wary of being like, oh, I've seen that guy. He was so much fun. Those women loved him. How do I be like him? Because you don't want to be like him. You want to actually think of yourself as a personal brand. You want to think about what you've got really going for you, what you value, what's important to you. And then you want to choose a strategy and a way of building and going about that that's going to be unique and specific to you rather than mimicking somebody else.
Right. And that's like what's most attractive is whatever authenticity and vulnerability to who you are. And I think, you know, for me, when I went through that community years ago, it was like a phase of my life learning, and this is what I've seen for other individuals as well. It was like a phase where you learn some bit of self-actualization, you learn how to play with power, but ultimately the most attractive thing is just being who you really are and discovering that and finding that and showing that with the world. And then if the world accepts it, great. If other people don't accept it, that's on them and it's not on you. And that's really where true, I at least see, is where true attraction and that's where real relationship can come in, because then your authentic self and someone who's compatible with that authentic self will inevitably come in and match with that over time.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And that's why I'm glad you brought that up, because it is a journey and it is a process that I've 100% gone on, or I'm going on myself. It's ongoing. And a lot of the time, instead of looking down on that guy who's like, oh, I just would love to know how to approach a woman, in a bar or in a coffee shop, that's just where he's at in his journey. And sometimes as men and women, as people, we need to go through the loop of realizing that we can meet people, we can experience sexual or intimate connections. That's something that we can access to learn and develop ourselves. And then usually what happens is people, as you said, they have a bit of a honeymoon period with the world of pickup, and then they pop out of the other end eventually. And I think that's okay. I'm more concerned if someone's still, deep into the game after 20 years or something. I have serious concerns. But if you, you use that for a bit, you develop yourself as a person, and then you think, oh, actually, there's all these other areas of my life, whether it's like business or fitness or spirituality or wellness or whatever it is. Like, there's other stuff that's calling to me that I want to now learn about and grow from. So getting good at games should not be an end unto itself. As a phase, I think it's okay. As long as you're not hurting anybody else, I think it's okay.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, we'll take time out for one more question here, Hayley, and then if anyone has any questions, we'll go into a couple questions there. I know we're coming up on time. Guys, if you have any questions for Hayley, please feel free to put them there in the comment section, and we'll get to that. Hayley, last question from me. What do you think is the most important thing for someone to know when entering into a relationship, either about themselves, about the nature of relationship? Like, what do you think is if there was one, and I know it doesn't work like this, but if there was one piece of advice, gold nugget, whatever that may be, what do you think that would be?
For me, it would be that a relationship isn't an end destination. It's not that we get there and everything's great. Is in fact, relationships are dynamic. They're like living, breathing things, and they change. And that change is okay, as long as we can like roll with the punches. So sometimes very passionate relationships morph into friendships. Sometimes friendships become passionate. Sometimes over the course of a long-term relationship, we'll have periods of feeling closer, more distant, more sexually attracted, less sexually attracted. And actually, it's not about reaching relationship utopia where everything is perfect all the time. It's actually about a deep level of acceptance between the two of you as people, where you're like, you know what, even if I don't fully understand you as another person, because I can't, because you're another person, I fully accept you, you fully accept me. We're fully both committed to this vision of building this relationship together. And because of that, even as we have challenges, periods of difference or distance, we're going to learn how to keep coming back to the table, to keep communicating through that and keep affirming stuff to one another. So it's about it's a constant work in progress rather than an end destination.
I love that. Yeah, I think just knowing that the nature of a relationship is really key. Like, if you know the rules of the field that you're playing on, you're going to have a much more enjoyable time in the game, or whatever that. And when I say the game, I actually just mean of like whatever it is you're playing, not the actual book. But yeah, I love that. I think that's really, really important, just to have a right framework for what you're going into. I know for me, I used to think relationships were just, it's if you come together and it works out a certain way, then like you find stability in the relationship, and then it's kind of like the same thing for the rest of your life. And that was definitely the mind saying, I'd like something that's stable and that looks the same, that I can feel safe in. But relationship is always changing, because that's ultimately what life is. It's relationship with everything, and being in touch with that and in tune with it.
Yeah, 100%.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for coming on, Hayley. I'm going to take a couple questions out if we have any. Are you okay with that? I know we got about 5 more minutes here, and then you got to go. Guys, what questions do you have for Hayley? What questions do we have for her? So I can give her a little bit of time here.
Can I ask, is it guys mainly that are listening to this one? Have we got any ladies in the house as well?
I'm actually I get guys and girls, so I'm 55% men, 45% women. I feel like I'm a pretty balanced individual, so I get both.
Yeah, I'm the same. I'm the same. And I think it's really interesting actually, because we've spoken a lot about the world of pickup, but another time, Jared, I'd happily rant away about women's dating advice, like the constructs that women have around dating as well. Because I think as men and women, we're both told very different stories about what we should expect out of dating, love, and relationships, and how to find compatibility in that is super, super interesting.
Yeah, I would love to hear that perspective, because I don't really, I mean, I've been doing this relationship series with Laura, and it's really just been interesting seeing her perspective on things as we've gone deeper and deeper in this. But I think we come from there's just they're completely different worlds. And so both sexes might bring a certain set of expectations to the relationship and how it's going to function. And then obviously the more expectations we have that aren't spoken in any relationship causes shit to go up and down and trying to find stability. And so I definitely would be interested to hear that. I don't think we have any questions coming up. It's pretty early here in the morning. It's still 7:45.
So it's like, I like the early bird as well. I would just say, well, thank you so much though for having me. I've really, and also your questions were really purposeful. I so appreciate it. And just say to any of the men or women who may see this afterwards, if you'd like to ask me your own question, I also have something called my 30-day challenge. This is more for, I guess, if you want to get started at dating, or you want to start this journey of meeting people, and you want to do it in a way that's ethical and congruent, and it's about a balance between how men and women see things. I've got that online. I will send you the link. It's hayleyquinclub.com. You can join for £1 English currency for a week, and I actually give you response and feedback on all of the challenges that you can complete, and you can do it even during self-isolation. So if you want to use this time purposefully, that would be awesome. And thank you again for being such a great interview. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Hayley. I've really enjoyed you being here. Tell us, what other programs or things you got going on right now?
So I am the champion of meeting people in real life. So I teach men and women, so we don't discriminate, of all different orientations and backgrounds, how to build their confidence and go out there into the real world. All that information is on my website, hayleyquinn.com. I've also obviously got my YouTube. I'm pretty easy to find on there. However, for now, as I said, if you go to hayleyquinnclub.com, there's a cool little online community I have there, an online video library, online challenges. So even when we are all being explicitly told to lock our doors and sit with ourselves, just know there is still stuff you can do to be proactive. And I'd love to see you guys there.
Beautiful. And guys, if you want to check out the links right there in the YouTube description box below. Hayley, thanks so much for coming on again. We'll definitely have to do this again sometime in the future and get really the girls' perspective of dating. I would love to hear that.
Awesome. Yeah, hopefully to another time, and see you guys soon.
All right. Thank you so much, Hayley.
Bye.
Beautiful. That's all we got for this time, you guys. Thanks for joining us. We do have our live coaching later on in the evening. So if you guys want to stick around for our live coaching, that's going on at 7 p.m. Eastern time. Laura and I will be coaching a couple individuals. So if you want to check that out, feel free to check that out. I'm really excited for that. Other than that, thanks so much for joining us, guys. I will see you all soon. Have a great day.